Lesson 8 Questions and Answers Concerning Meditation, Prayer, and Cosmic Consciousness. How often I have told you that the greatest miracle which can happen to you is the discovery of your immortal self. I would say that again and again for 1,000 times. Let me add to it by telling you that one inspiring hour alone with God, in communion with Him in His light, is worth more to you than all the possessions of all the earth, all of its jewels, its gold, yes, even its richest throne. This highest of all attainments of man I am trying to open up to you through your continued growth of comprehension. Do not think it is easy for you to acquire such a high goal overnight. That is impossible. Many write that they have followed my instructions carefully but cannot decentrate to the stillness of zero, try how they may. The following is typical of many such questions. Question. Although your instructions seem explicit about decentrating to the zero of stillness, I have great difficulty in doing so at will. Does this mean to hold the mind steady and quiet without thinking? If so, it is a very difficult thing to do. Just once have I reached the point of absolute stillness, and it was beautiful. I was unconscious of anything but being merged in that pure light. How I wish I could attain that state at will. Answer. The more you can attain that state, the easier it will be to repeat it. Your question indicates that you make too great an effort to accomplish that result. This means that you are concentrating upon having it happen, instead of decentrating to let it happen. Do not look for the symptoms of it. Do not expect it or try to make it happen. Just say to yourself, I want to be alone with God. And the majesty of that thought and your desire for aloneness with God will drive all things else from your mind. The effort you indicate you are making gives me the impression that you are making your brain very active in trying to make your mind still. Forget your brain. Forget your body. Take the attitude that nothing in the world interests you, nothing whatsoever. Think of beautiful music to stop your thinking about your grocery bill or your visitor who is coming or any problem that weighs heavily on your heart. Meditation comes from the heart. Do not let the brain interfere with your inspiring communion from soul to soul. It is wonderful that it happened to you even once, for that means that it must happen again often, and more often as you open your heart to it. You might as well expect to play a symphony after one music lesson as to expect it to be able to decentrate to that ecstatic state of inspiration at once. You must realize that your unfolding to the point you have already arrived at has been a long one. You are ready for the light now, else you would not have so keenly desired it. My light and my inspirations, however, cannot re-inspire you immediately, for you always take first instructions or first readings through your senses by recording them on your brain before it is finally absorbed by your soul to become knowledge. Just you have to first take food into your stomach before it is absorbed into the bloodstream to become nourishment. Very many even expect to attain full cosmic consciousness immediately by applying my instructions. That is as utterly impossible as it is undesirable for one who is not ready for it. Students often write to me that they have been in metaphysics for 20 years, and think that it is a sufficient reason for the attainment of the highest and rarest of all human attainments. One can be in metaphysics for 50 years without having one's soul touched by the light for even 1 second. The study of metaphysics, like a university training, may give one much information without any real knowledge. Many great metaphysical authorities may be enabled to make many scientifically true statements of facts, but have no knowledge of them whatsoever. They would be unable to explain them if asked to do so. Such a metaphysical authority might be as completely unable to commune with God in his heart as a student of musical history and theory might be unable to compose even a simple melody, much less a concerto. How many there are all through the metaphysical world who perpetually repeat the same scientifically true statements, who could not explain them because they do not know what they mean. I have heard such statements as, all things are one, hundreds of times, but when asked to explain how the 50 men in the room plus everything else in the universe are one, they become as silent as a scientist because if asked what light or gravitation are. The only way you can ever find that great treasure, which is yourself, is to be able to decentrate to the point where you can forget your body and be aware of your immortal soul. I can tell you how to do this through these lessons, and I can undoubtedly re-inspire you with the light of my inspiration, but only through your own great desire in cooperation with the principle, practice, and instructions I am giving you. I cannot even do that unless you let my soul touch your soul, instead of just reading my words with your senses. Metaphysical students and teachers have often told me that they have known some of the things I am teaching for 25 years, This is not true, for most of the knowledge given in these lectures has never before been known on earth. I want this to be thoroughly understood, for it is important to you that you know the difference between stating a fact, which really is a fact, and knowing it. I will give you a simple example to exemplify my meaning. For centuries, people have made these two true statements: God is love and God is light. Yet no one up to this day has any knowledge whatsoever of their meaning. Until today, the meaning of love is an abstraction to the metaphysicists, clergymen, or laymen alike, and the meaning of light has never been defined or explained by science. If mankind ever knew the meaning of love, we would have had a different kind of civilization. Its scientific meaning as law applicable to every phenomenon in the universe has never been known. Likewise, the scientific meaning of light, electricity, gravitation, magnetism, energy, polarization, atomic structure, and many, many other things have never yet been known on Earth, and are herein being revealed for the first time in the history of man. So much for the true statements which are made but not known. There are an equal number of untrue statements constantly being made in both metaphysics and science which are believed to be true, but cannot be tested as true or untrue because of lack of knowledge regarding them. I will also quote two of these as examples. Metaphysics and metaphysical books have for years been saying, get into the high vibration of the spirit and out of the low vibration of matter. And it is only in your consciousness, so it is not real, not knowing that the light of consciousness is the only reality. There are no vibrations whatsoever to the spirit. The light of the spirit is absolutely motionless, while the vibrations of matter increase with density and decrease as they approach the stillness of space. Such teachings are very confusing when one says in one breath, seek the high vibration of the spirit, and in the next breath, be still and know. There is one thing in particular which the divine Iliad message teaches that no one has ever heard of before nor taught. That is the principle of decentration, or expansion of the senses, in order to forget body and become wholly mind when in meditation or communion with God. Teachers have taught that one must concentrate in order to conceive idea for creative expression. Such teachings defeat the very purpose of meditation, for concentration focuses the senses to a point, and thus forces body awareness, while decentration expands the senses and thus aids body forgetfulness and spiritual awareness. Decentration is a relaxation of the senses to give freedom to the mind to conceive ideas from its source, while concentration tenses the seat of sensation in the brain and prevents reaching beyond the electric activity of the brain into the stillness of the seat of consciousness from where our knowledge comes. My teaching regarding decentration is an entirely new principle, for no one has ever thought of or suspected it as an attribute of the mind until God gave me this knowledge and commanded me to teach it. You have read a few of the words of God's command to me in Lesson 7. As proof that this principle was never before known on earth, or had ever entered human consciousness, is that no word which covers that idea has ever been provided. The dictionary makes no provision for the thought, for it has no word for it. In the same sense, many will say that they know God and have always known Him, basing such a statement upon the recognition of belief that God exists. Belief is not knowledge. I say to him who believes that he knows God, if you know God, you can define Him and relate Him to nature and nature's process. Can you do that? Well, naturally he cannot, for no one has yet known God sufficiently to define Him as a scientific fact until He Himself gave that knowledge through His message to those who are able to comprehend it. That is the way God unfolds all creating things. He gives that for today, which is of today. If God had long ago been definable, there would be but one religion and one concept of God, instead of many religions because of the many concepts of God. Out of this new knowledge contained in the message and its teaching will come the one God and the one religion. Nothing can stop it, for it is God's plan to now blot out the vast ignorance of man, which is keeping him in the barbaric stage of unfolding where he still kills in order to take, and is himself killed because he still takes. Until human relations are based upon the love principle of giving for re-giving, which God gave as His one law of rhythmic, balanced interchange in all transactions of man and nature, mankind will be on the descending direction of self-annihilation in the mass, while the few who do know and who live the love principle will survive. and out of these few a new civilization will be born unto the glory of God. I tell you this because of the present decadent state of man in the mass, whose ever-growing greed for possessions, even to whole world ownership, will as surely break him in the measure of his own breach of the law. These present wars of man are the manifestation of greed, killing greed, and greed must disappear before love can be in the world. In relation to this idea, God's words in the message are, "If love be in the world, hate cannot also be." Question: how long do you think it will be before people will stop praying to a God as a God of fear and wrath and know him as a God of love? Answer: just so long as fear, wrath, crime, selfishness, and greed, and the wars which are their harvest continue as the practices of man, just so long will his God be a wrathful, vengeful God who invents untold tortures for sinners. Man conceives a God of his own image, and that conception which he images always reflects himself. Question: why is it that people ever got the idea of a God of fear and wrath? The Bible is full of it. Why should it be in the Bible if it is not true? Answer: when man first began to think at the dawn of consciousness, he then began to arise from his jungle ages, and he was slow to throw off the habits and practices of the jungle. Early man was fearing man of wrath. He feared the wrath of all things, tempest and avalanche, torrid heat and icy cold, which froze his infants at their mother's breast. He feared the jungle animals and reptiles which smote him mercilessly, even as he himself smote mercilessly. When he suspected the existence of a God, he could not think of him in any other character than a wrathful God of fear, for he knew not else but wrath and fear and killing mercilessly. For he was still a brute man, and he could not conceive of any other kind of man than a brute God. He could not possibly conceive a God of love, for he had not yet begun to have the slightest trace of knowing what love meant. All during these early pagan and barbarian days, men appeased God and gave him pleasure by slaying men by the thousands, sacrificing their own sons, and shedding rivers of blood upon their altars. They filled fountains with the blood of dozens of animals to baptize newborn infants. They cleansed sinners by plunging them beneath these bloody founts, which we still sing about in our hymns. The entire Bible is a true record of the history of its day. It tells of the nature of people of that day. That record is invaluable to tell us the nature of past ages of people. Long after the Bible was assembled, gladiators still killed each other for the amusement of women and children of that day. In the time of Jesus, the very altars were daily drenched with blood. Kings thought nothing of ordering all male babies slain, or of killing thousands upon thousands of prisoners taken in war, sparing only the virgins for their own pleasure. During that time, practically every tribe warred against every other tribe. Killing and looting was common, and people held great festivals to see prisoners slaughtered and their raiment divided. If the Bible did not truly record its day and age, it would be as valueless as the history of today, which left out the atom bomb to give posterity a better opinion of us. Question: what evidence is there that the unknown writer of the Bhagavad Gita was a cosmic conscious mystic? Answer: all who have known the illumination speak the same language in words which may differ but in meaning, which are identical. No matter what words are used by any past mystic, other mystics who follow always recognize the one meaning, which is in all writing, or in the spoken word, such as those of Jesus, who did not leave any written record for posterity. I will quote some passages from the Bhagavad Gita, which sing their own glory in language unmistakable. Another sun gleams there, another moon, another light, not dusk, nor dawn, nor noon, which they who once behold return no more. They have attained my rest, life's utmost boon. I am what surveys, only that knowledge knows, the known by the knower. Fain would I see, as thou thyself declare it, sovereign Lord, the likeness of thy form wholly revealed, O thou divinest one, if this can be. If I may bear the sight, make thyself visible, Lord of all prayers, show me thy very self, eternal God. Behold, this is the universe, look. What is live and dead I gather all in one of me. Gaze, as thy lips have said on God, eternal, very God, see me, see what thou prayest. Thou kennest not, nor with human eyes ever mayest. Therefore I give thee sense divine. Have other eyes, new light, and look, this is my glory unveiled to mortal sight. Of many thousand mortals, one perchance strives for truth, and of these few that strive, nay, and rise high, one only, here and there, knoweth me as I am, the very truth. For in this world being is twofold, the divided one, the undivided one. All things that live are the divided, that which sits apart, the undivided. I am the Spirit seated deep in every creature's heart. From me they come, by me they live, and at my word they depart. Every line of the entire Bhagavad Gita is recognizable by any mystic as the unmistakable work of a supreme mystic. Furthermore, any writing purported to be the work of an illumined mystic, but is not as represented, would at once be known by another mystic. The divine Iliad says of this fact, "Light knows light, and there need be no words." I would suggest that you procure a copy of this work. It comes in several translations. The one I like best is called The Song Celestial, and is written by Sir Edwin Arnold. It is a small, pocket-sized book. The only other book which I would recommend for you to read upon the subject of cosmic consciousness is the fine book by Dr. Richard Maurice Buck, published in 1910, 11 years before my illumination in 1921, entitled Cosmic Consciousness. In 1925, someone called my attention to this book, which is a very close description of what happened to me in my 39 days and nights of cosmic consciousness in 1921. Dr. Buck actually experienced the severance of mind from body in a partial cosmic consciousness experience for a few seconds or moments, which utterly transformed him. His own words are very illuminating in this respect. I hereby quote him from page 9 and 10 of his book. It was in the early spring, at the beginning of his 36th year. He and two friends had spent the evening reading Wordsworth, Shelley, Keats, Browning, and especially Whitman. His mind, deeply under the influence of the ideas, images, and emotions called up by the reading and talk of the evening, was calm and peaceful. He was in a state of quiet, almost passive enjoyment. All at once, without any warning of any kind, he found himself wrapped around, as it were, by a flame-colored cloud. For an instant he thought of fire, some sudden conflagration in a great city. The next he knew that light was within himself. Directly afterwards came upon him a sense of exultation, of immense joyousness, accompanied or immediately followed by an intellectual illumination quite impossible to describe. Into his brain streamed one momentary lightning flash of the Brahmic splendor which has ever since lightened his life. Upon his heart fell one drop of Brahmic bliss, leaving thenceforth for always an aftertaste of heaven. Among other things, he did not come to believe. He saw and knew that the cosmos is not dead matter, but a living presence, that the soul of man is immortal, that the universe is so built and ordered that without any pre-adventure all things work together for the good of each and all, that the foundation principle of the world is that what we call love, and that the happiness of everyone is in the long run absolutely certain. He claims that he learned more within the few seconds during which the illumination lasted than in previous months or even years of study, and that he learned much that no study could have taught. Dr. Buck also says, the Savior of man is cosmic consciousness, in Paul's language, the Christ. This experience was never repeated with Dr. Buck, but he gave his life and study as it related to the few mystics of all time. He lists 37 partial and complete illuminations, and cites many extremely interesting facts in comparing one with another, which will help you to comprehend this supreme happening much better. When you read of these very few cases out of billions of men born on earth during the last 3,000 years, it should not make you wonder why it does not happen to you immediately after becoming aware of it as an existent fact. Nor should you feel disappointed because I cannot open that door at once for you, which you alone can open. Rejoice rather that the light comes to you a little at a time, more and more, as ignorance is voided with knowing, as comprehension of the message gradually reaches your heart and soul. That is why I keep persisting that you take one paragraph at a time and meditate upon it until your soul knows what your senses have read in words and recorded upon your brain. Until it gets beyond your brain into your consciousness, you do not know it. Treasured cosmic friends, to all of you who have re-given to us so sincerely and deeply for that which we are giving to you in these cosmic lessons, which God gave through my blessed husband for his messengers of today, we send a great big thank you. The letters have been so richly rewarding after the first 4 lessons and mean more to us than words can ever say. Through you we hear God's voice telling us that by giving this course of study in this way, that is what He wants us to do and now. We heard His call to give the message in this manner through you, for it was a repeated request of so many who were unable to come to Swanona to study with Doctor that made us decide the message must be given through an intimate home study course so that this need could be met. Thus does God direct us, all and every one, in unfolding His great plan. You will remember reading in Lesson 7 how God commanded my husband to spread the message through his well-chosen written word to all nations and people, and in giving his home study course, he is obeying that sacred command. So that we may share with you the words written to us by other cosmic messengers, of whom you are all such a tangible part, we will give some brief excerpts from some of the precious letters received. The most glorious human experience is that of sharing. And while it may be many months before we can know the touch of your warm handclasp, we can share the warmth of this love given. Wish we could share all the recent letters with you, for all are so wonderful, since they portray an understanding and appreciation that only come from knowing. However, space will only permit these few letters which we'll share with you now. These excerpts are from clergymen, lawyers, doctors, businessmen, and women, and homemakers. Quote, "The lessons are truly wonderful. I have read and reread them with such joy and inspiration, and I am glad to say with constantly increasing understanding. These lessons are very precious to me as instruments for developing cosmic consciousness. I want to be illumined to know my oneness with the eternal light. These lessons are moving me toward the goal. If the first lessons are a prophecy of the forthcoming ones, then I am already assured of complete envelopment in the glorious light. The lesson on meditation is a masterful presentation. E.H. from Arizona. Your home study course is most inspiring. It is just what I needed. It inspires me with confidence and strong faith that I shall comprehend every bit of it and begin to live every minute in ecstasy and balance. Even the structure of the course and the manner in which you express your knowledge seems to contain and express to us your infinite balance and loving ecstasy. H.T. from Chicago. You certainly know and show the scientific and true reason for the why of the universe, and cover them as no teacher has ever done or ever attempted to do from anything I have ever heretofore read. I hope that by careful study of what you have so carefully written to someday get a feeling realization of your wisdom. C.L., New Jersey. Although I have been an earnest student of metaphysics and philosophy for 25 years, yet I was never too sure about my foundation. Your lessons are clearing up many misunderstandings. M.F., Moline, Illinois. We want to thank you both with all our hearts for the home study course. It is the most wonderful teaching of God and His love of man for we have ever heard in our lives. We thank you with all our hearts for showing us the light and how to know God. It is so tremendous in its application, yet you make it so simple. J.V. Detroit. I wish I could tell you what such letters mean to my husband personally, for to know that those have come who are beginning to comprehend the true nature of God is a tremendous inspiration to him. The comprehension and the living of God's universal law must and will come, and you who are the forerunners and leaders of the new cosmic age will have the knowledge for the founding of an order of world peace and happiness never before known on earth. Your next 4 lessons are extremely important, for in them Doctor will explain the heretofore unknown meaning of what Father, Mother mean when we speak of God that way. No one yet knows what it means, nor how basic is this tremendous idea of the Creator as being Father, Mother of this sexed electric universe. When you get these lessons, you will realize the fundamental import of the Father-Mother principle in every thought and action of your life and of all nature's phenomena. You will then begin to know the mystery which shrouds the electric thinking process, which extends from the light of mind to the manifest knowledge of mind, and how motion seemingly emerges from stillness to create this physical universe of form. You will begin to have the very foundation of this majestic illusion of unreality which emerges from the one reality. Gradually this idea will be constructed by simple diagrams and simply worded postulates, axioms, and examples, which will give you so vivid and clear a comprehension of this sexed electric universe that your inner vision will see God face to face and hear His inspiring inner voice in communion with you in a manner which would be impossible without that comprehension. My husband believes that he can now make you fully comprehend why this physical universe is not real, being but an illusion of God's imagining. How comforting when one's comprehend that in the unreality of matter there can be no death, sin, or evil leaving naught but love and eternal life. He has long felt that it could not be explained to one who has not himself known the complete illumination into cosmic consciousness, but now fully believes that by laying a proper foundation in point-to-point simple steps, the unreal universe can be comprehended for the unreality actually is. The undivided father-mother principle from which emerges the divided father and mother principle of pairs of sexed opposites will be the first simple step in the direction of transforming you into an advanced student. Remember, my husband is entirely God-taught, and perhaps is the only man who has ever earned a doctor's degree of science without going through college, for as you know, he was forced to leave school at 9 years of age. So by taking his teaching one step at a time, you will not only unfold in God awareness, which means personal happiness to the nth degree, but you will find yourself becoming a natural scientist and confounding professors in physics as some of the doctor's students write him that they are already done. Always remember to take these lessons slowly, for on first reading you may well miss the deep import of an explanation which may appear too simple to ponder on. As I often hear my husband say, a simple story is the hardest to tell, and I would add it is the simple story of life that man has always made complex by his unawareness of its basic simplicity. Know our every thought is with you always, and know too we treasure you so deeply for your help in spreading God's message with us. Our love to you, sincerely, Lyle Russell. End of lesson. Lesson number 9, First Principles. In the first 8 lessons, I have purposely laid the foundation for a better understanding of God, the nature of God, the relationship of God to man and his universe, the structure of the material universe, and God's process of creation. Now again, I wish to strongly emphasize the fact that what you will find as I gradually take you behind the scene of God's cosmic stage is utterly simple, and as fully comprehensible to you when you finally get it as adding 2 and 2 together. Do please take my word for it, and never for a moment say it is over your head, or that you cannot understand it, for you can understand it. Remember that new knowledge always seems over your head. You have got to think it over and over again, then meditate upon it until you now read with your senses you will gradually know in your soul. It will then become a part of you. The more you can become illumined with cosmic consciousness, the more you will find yourself using God's mind as your mind, and God's hands as your hands. To become a master of creative expression by being able to make the shortcuts to achievement that I have been enabled to make by my knowing, you must master each step as you go, each idea as you absorb it, by going back to it time after time until you begin to wonder why you could ever have thought any part of it seemed difficult. For I again say that all of its seeming complexity will lead you to the most surprising simplicity. To again accentuate the simplicity of it, I will yet again say that if your intelligence is great enough for you to add up to 9, or to understand that you breathe inward and outward from a balanced center in you, you can understand the working of most complex phenomena in all nature. I say to you this seriously, and I mean what I say, for God never passes 9 in any creative expression, nor does any phenomena in nature ever exceed the principle upon which your breathing or heartbeat is based. Anything in nature or in your life's problem, which might have 1,000,000 parts and 1,000,000 complexities, if taken apart, will be found to constitute one simple principle of 3 elements. God multiplies these 3 by 3 to make 9, but never more than that. So if you can understand the principle of the basic 3, and if you can multiply that 3 by 3, you can become the greatest chemist, metallurgist, electrical engineer, poet, painter, philosopher, inventor in the whole world, if no one but you in the world did understand it. This basic 3, which cannot be added to nor subtracted from, will hereinafter be referred to as the Divine Trinity. Now we shall begin at the beginning and build this structure of creation from its birth in the mind of the one living being, the one person, the one presence, God, Father, Mother, Creator of the universe. And that is where we shall begin, with the personal being of God, the one being. For God is, like you, a person, the one personal being in all the universe, for he is the universe as you are the universe. Like you, God is mind, which you cannot see, and he is body, which you can see. Like God, you are mind, which no man can see, and you are body, which all men can see. Like your body, God's electric body is ever-changing matter in motion, just as your body is ever-changing matter in motion. Your body, which is God's body, is motivated by a pulsing heartbeat and rhythmic breathing, inward and outward. Every little cell of your body breathes in and out and pulses to your heartbeat. Your body is the record of your thinking, just as God's body is the record of his thinking. Your body is part of God's body. You borrowed it from his body, and you will return it to his body. Whatever attribute your body has, God's body has. God's body pulses to its universal heartbeat. Every cell of God's body breathes in and out. Every sun, planet, growing plant or tree, electron of an atom or stellar galaxy. That is the most conspicuous fact of nature. Every body is an extension of God's body. The universal heartbeat, which records God's concentrative, discentrative thought pulsation, is geared to your heartbeat. The heartbeat and breathing of the tiger in the jungle is the pulsing of God's heartbeat and breathing. God's soul is the universal soul, and you are the soul. God's mind is the universal mind, and you are that mind. God's thinking is universal thinking, and it is your thinking. God's body is the universal body, and you are that body. God's light is the sexless Father, Mother of the universe, and your light is the sexless Father, Mother of the universe. Likewise, God's divided thinking is the sex-conditioned Father and Mother of all creating things, as your divided thinking is the sex-conditioned Father and Mother of all creating things. God, the one person, is you. You faintly know that at this early stage of your unfolding consciousness, life by life and age by age will pass with your greater and still greater awareness of the fact until gradually that individuality which you think of yours as your person will merge into the person of the one being whom all men already are. You are still in that state of the unfolding of the man idea in which electric sensed awareness of your body predominates. So long as sensed awareness predominates over cosmic mind awareness, you will feel the separation of yourself as one of the many ones, and God will be afar. With the gradual unfolding of the cosmic conscious awareness of the light in you, your separateness will disappear in unity, and you can knowingly say, I and my Father are one. Cosmic thinking. The more cosmic our thinking becomes, the more our understanding of our unity with God becomes. Cosmic man gradually ceases to think of the universe and its creator as mind and matter, or as the visible and invisible universe, or as the physical and spiritual universe. The cosmic thinker who knows God in his heart as his very self, yea, who knows him as his very soul, thinks of the whole universe as God, the one personal being. One who has been illumined into full cosmic consciousness could not possibly think of God in any other way. I cannot, because in my lifetime of such complete God consciousness I have grown to think of the universal consciousness as my consciousness, and because of a lifetime of working knowingly with God, I could not think of Creator and creation separately or apart from me. I might think of the Creator and creation as mind and body of God, but not as mind and matter. Nor could I think of mind and body of God as separate from each other, nor without including myself. Neither you nor I ever think of our personal selves as mind and matter. That would be impossible, for we are so familiar with the idea of their oneness that when we think of ourselves, we include the whole structure of our own little personal universe. What I desire of you is that you begin to think of God that way and cease thinking of him as past ages of men always have thought of him. For it is that separative thinking of God that has placed God afar from man, a divine being dwelling somewhere afar and outside of man. All cosmic conscious mystics have expressed that thought. Jesus expressed it in saying, I and my Father are one. He emphatically stated that he alone, without the Father, could do nothing. He also stated that whatsoever he did with the Father, you also could do. Therefore I say to you that you should write the desire deep into your soul, through your heartbeat, so that you should be enabled to vision the universe as a whole, with you yourself as its center. Think of your desire as God's desire expressed through you. As you gradually learn to think that way, God comes ever closer until there is absolute oneness. When I tell you to write the desire of your soul, I mean that until you do so, you will not know it as a part of you. And when you so know it, nothing can prevent its fruition, for all the law of the universe is yours to command to bring that desire to fruition. And when I say to write it on your soul, through your heartbeat, I mean that the heartbeat of the universe, which manifests the law, is your heartbeat. When you think that way, with knowing back of your thinking, your desire unfolds as naturally as though it were a part of that pattern of your destiny. When, however, you just write your desire upon your senses and it never gets beyond your brain, you do not know it. You may believe it as an intellectual conclusion, but believing that way is sensing, not knowing. For it is but the senses of the brain which remember and repeat beliefs, but the cosmic mind alone knows. I have dwelt upon this idea for some length, for the transformation from sensing to knowing will be easier for you to make for yourself the more you are enabled to comprehend the status of each. To better help you to make the transition, get into the fixed habit of thinking with God's mind, knowing that you are the one being, and working with God's hand, knowing that you are the one body of the one being. The more you can loose your own individuality by thinking universally, the more you can find your greater individuality in God. John Jones of earth shall become the divine John Jones of the high heavens, whose dwelling place is the kingdom of God's light, whenever he desires to make that glorious transition. In other more familiar words, you must lose your life on earth to find your life eternal. The more you can do this, the more you are thinking cosmically from a cosmic conscious basis. Therefore, the state of cosmic consciousness will be ever integrating through the seat of sensation and finding rest in its centering light of consciousness. Step by step, I will clarify this idea for your greater comprehension. First principles summarized in postulates. The Creator is the all-knowing mind of undivided, still, and unconditioned magnetic light. Mind thinks in electric pulsations which constitute the universal heartbeat. Mind thinks because of desire to manifest what mind knows. The electric pulsations of mind thinking are concentrative, decentrative sequences expressed in light waves. Concentrative thinking produces formed, dense, visible bodies from invisible space by integrating large volumes into small volumes. Decentrative thinking disintegrates dense, concentrated bodies and returns them to invisible, expanded space. Mind knows all idea. All idea is creation. Thinking takes idea apart by dividing idea into two opposite electrical conditions which multiply through interchange to create many forms of many ideas. The light waves of thinking create electrically vibrating sense bodies. Electrically vibrating bodies cannot know anything but can sense everything. Conscious mind cannot sense anything but can know everything. Consciousness is static. Sensation is dynamic. That which you can see, you cannot know. That which you can know, you cannot see. Axioms. The realities of life are balance, love, truth, and the law. These are the qualities of mind which you cannot see. You can only know them. The unrealities of life you alone see, for they cannot be known. The realities are qualities of mind at rest. The unrealities are quantities of sensed matter in motion. Examples: you can know God, but you cannot see him. You can see God's body, but you cannot know it. Likewise, you can know a friend and you can see his body, but you cannot see him or know his body. You cannot know a sunset sky, but your senses can see it and comprehend it. That which you can know about a sunset sky is its beauty, which you cannot see. For beauty, like love and truth and the laws, are realities which can only be known. An intriguing thought for deep meditation. Ask of yourself this question: wherein does my seemingly separate identity differ from God's identity? Your knowing will answer: I have a mind which is God's mind. I have a body which is of exactly the same material as God's body. It is made up of corpuscles of dense matter surrounded by a large amount of space between each corpuscle, just as God's body is constructed. My body differs only in scale from the universal body. It has been created out of light by dividing it into light waves, just as God's body has been created. God created his body, which is my body, by his thinking. I am his thinking. I have created my body with my thinking. What God is, I am. My Father and I are one. I am not alone. I am the universe. The Divine Trinity. The universe of Creator and creation is founded upon three elements: mind, which is one, and the electric thinking of mind, which is two, the two electric pulsations of the universal body. The one light of mind is the unconditioned, undivided, and sexless Father-Mother of the one whole idea of creation. The two divided lights of mind thinking are the dually sex-conditioned Father and Mother of all body forms of the infinitely many ideas which constitute creation. This is the most important idea yet given to you, for it is the basis of all things. The reason for its supreme importance is because all you have to make use of in building your entire structure of knowledge and power for creating anything, or for solving any problem, are these three elements. 2. Father, Mind 1, Father, Mother, and 3. Mother. These three are the divine trinity of this mind-controlled, sex-conditioned pairs of opposites, sex mates, of this sexed electric universe, which we will henceforth carefully consider by taking one little step at a time. I believe we have now arrived at a point where I can make the great but simple underlying principle of creation perfectly clear to you. I know, however, that its very simplicity will be your greatest hurdle to overcome, because of the seeming complexity of everything, and the multiplicity of so many kinds of things and conditions of things which constitute this universe. Your lifetime of living so complex and multiple in existence has unfitted you for seeing so vast a thing as this universe simply. I know that the only way to break down that lifelong habit of thinking and seeing complexity is to take one little step at a time, by taking up one little idea at a time, and tell it to you as though you were children, and make sure that you understand each step before the next one is taken. The first simple step is to call your attention to that illusion of infinite complexity in the familiar toy known as the kaleidoscope. If you look through it, you will see an endless repetition of effect reaching out toward infinite space. But if you could get within it, you would see three mirrors and a few pieces of broken glass of different colors. The mirrors, reflecting in each other, extend their reflections out into an imagined infinity, which it is not actually there. That imagined infinity is but reflected light and form projected upon an imagined screen of space, to create an illusion of patterned forms which also are not there. I cite this example because the entirety of creation is also based upon three mirrors of magnetic light which project the whole idea of creation out into an imagined infinity of space which is not there, and of time which is not there, to create a cosmic illusion of patterned forms and countless effects which are also not there. In my illumination, I immediately knew that the entirety of the electric universe of matter in motion is an unreality, a cosmic illusion. In that first timeless flash, I knew that God alone exists, God the One. Likewise, I knew that 1-2 pulsation of the heartbeat of God's thinking. Knowing it, I knew all there is to know, for knowing God as idea, and as God's body as idea manifested in thought, I could then know the unreality of time, space, and motion which manifest thought, and the reality of the knower and thinker as a divine trinity. If I could but teach you the way God taught me, it would all be yours to know timelessly. But the next best thing is to take you back with me to that timeless flash of all-knowing and try to describe the timeless all-knowing as best I can, and amplify that with God's Word which I wrote down as my divinely inspired teachings during the time of complete severance. I instantly knew the knower as one, the one undivided magnetic light of all-knowing mind. I also knew the thinking of the knower to be two, the two of the pulsing heartbeat of the knower's electric thinking. In the knower and thinker, I knew the divine trinity as the one. In the knower, I knew the one whole idea of his all-knowing to be the love idea of father-motherhood as a static idea, uncreated, unconditioned, unexpressed, but desired. In the thinker, I knew the father-motherhood idea divided into fatherhood and motherhood as a dynamic expression of the static, mind-imagined idea. The father idea is expressed by the inward pulsation of the heartbeat of God's thinking, and the mother idea by the outward pulsation. One pulsation starts from rest in the magnetic light at a 0 point of desire, seeks a 0 point of rest in the light at the fulfillment of desire, and returns to the 0 point of its beginning to repeat it in endless sequence. The important thing for you to comprehend regarding the above is that every moment of your life you are attempting to fulfill some desire, Every effort you make toward that fulfillment is a positive action starting from rest to seek a point of rest. Your positive action expresses fatherhood. This electromagnetic universe of mind and body of God, the undivided magnetic light of mind knowing. The magnetic light of mind is balance and controls balance in all creating things. It centers all things from within and controls them from without. It is the surveyor and measure of all desire for creative expression. It is the invisible light of the Spirit, which can be located in all creating things but cannot be insulated nor affected by any material thing. It is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. It is motionless, changeless, undivided, unconditioned, and dimensionless. The magnetic light is Father-Mother of all created things. The divided electric lights of mind thinking. Electricity is the servant of mind. It is the instrument which manifests the light of mind, knowing by forming the imagined body forms of mind, imagining and recording them in electric waves of matter in motion. Electricity is the divider of all ideas into pairs of opposites, expressions of that idea which eternally appear, disappear, and reappear in endless sequence to create a universe of seeming change in a balanced universe in which there is no change. Electricity is the sex principle of this sexed electric universe of sex-conditioned matter in two-way motion. The two lights of electric waves are Father and Mother of creation. If you're thinking, it is concentrative. Concentration of thought expresses fatherhood. In concentration, you have formed the seed pattern for the next effort for fulfilling your desire. After you have reached the rest point of fulfillment, you must then relax your effort and carry only the seed pattern of that desire outward to rest in expanded space for rebirth into the pattern of seed. That is the negative reaction which expresses motherhood. In your thinking, it is decentrative. Decentration expresses motherhood. Fruition of any desire whatsoever demands constant interchange between the father and mother actions and reactions. The above diagrams are fraught with more meaning than I can tell you in many lessons. I will gradually unfold this idea of undivided sex as cause of all effect, and of divided sex as the one great underlying principle of all creating and disintegrating things. The above diagrams are the key to the great secret, which science has for so long been looking, the secret key which is the foundation of, and repeated in all phenomena of motion. That key is sex. To put it into words, it could be expressed as follows. The balanced idea of father-motherhood is divided and extended into equally and oppositely unbalanced ideas of father and motherhood. If at this point you do not grasp the idea clearly, do not dwell too much upon it, for I will give you 100 examples in the following lessons which you will find will repeat the above key principle without variation. It might clarify a little for you if, before you dismiss it temporarily from your mind, you take a deep breath by starting from rest and pulling inward from within until you have to stop at a point of rest where your desire to breathe has been fulfilled. You will find yourself in an unbalanced state of compression which you cannot possibly maintain. From that rest point, you will be compelled to thrust out from within and expand to regain your balanced condition at another point of rest which you also cannot maintain. Could you not then reason to yourself somewhat as follows? This is a universe of rest, from which motion extends two opposite ways to simulate rest through motion. Perhaps you might dwell on this idea a little longer and reason it out a little more clearly by throwing a ball in the air. Again, you will find that you have to start from zero at rest to throw the ball, which must seek a zero of rest after the desire has been fulfilled, when it will then return to the zero of its beginning. When my words to you seem inadequate, I turn to the words of my divine teacher for his words used in teaching me. I will quote his teachings and written down in the Divine Iliad. All things are one, but made to appear as two extensions of the one. Know thou that the two extensions of my recorded thinking are divided by the one which centers the two, the one controlling the two. For behold, I am within all things centering them, and I am without all things controlling them. End of lesson. Lesson 10. This sexed electric universe. The time has now come when we must utterly transform our primitive world thinking in respect to practically every one of the great elements which constitutes the basis of our human relations, our science, philosophy, and religion. Most important among these, which we will first consider, are love, sex, life and death, reincarnation, balance, energy, matter, polarity, growth, electricity, magnetism, and many other subjects of vital import to our lives as individual and as units of the world group. I do not mean that we shall modify or amplify our present concepts regarding these fundamental projects. I mean that we must utterly discard them. From now on, I want you to leap ahead 1,000 years in your thinking. You must step out of the barbaric into the cosmic age and draw all others up unto you. You must stop thinking of these different subjects as though they were different and separate effects. They are all one, for they are founded upon the divine Trinity. No effect in nature varies in cause from any other effect. The same principle underlies all effects of motion, and that principle is sex interchange between the two extended zeros of polarity in the divine Trinity. These control the interchange. The zero of cause which centers the two balances the interchange. All effects are the dual effect of interchange between pairs of opposed conditions. The effect of a stone falling to the ground, the swinging of a pendulum, the bankruptcy of a merchant, or his great success, are all based upon the principle of interchange between polarized opposites and their good or bad effects. The greater one's knowledge, the greater the power to balance and control all effects. Out of greater knowledge, a new world of men will come to transform past ages of gross ignorance. For this reason, we must transform world thinking of cause and effect in quite different terms than in the past. Mankind has thought of sex, for example, in terms of relation between the opposite sexes in organic living animal life, never for a moment including sex relation in the mineral kingdom, nor in hot suns or the ice caps of the poles of planets. With such thinking, we have used such terms as cohabitation and the sex relations as though the sex relation is entirely separate and apart from other relations, and as though its reproductive effect is limited to living things which die or growing things which decay. From now on, you must know the inclusiveness of sex as being expressed continuously and perpetually forever in all things, instead of thinking in terms of cohabitation and the sex relation. You must automatically think of it as the interchange between pairs of oppositely unbalanced conditions for the purpose of balancing those conditions. And that means every effect of motion in the entire universe. Good effects are those in which the interchange is balanced, and all bad effects are those in which balance is not complete. All motion is sex motion, for all motion has but one purpose, which is to divide the balance of the indivisible universal equilibrium into pairs of oppositely unbalanced conditions, which perpetually seek balance in each opposite mate for the purpose of repeating the divided sex condition. To the extent that any interchange balances the unbalanced condition in any pair of opposites, it will repeat itself in that measure. I know it is a difficult transition to make and more difficult to accept all at once without reservation. I can hear you in my imagination asking, "You do not mean minerals have sex, do you? Or you do not possibly mean that the motions of work in a factory or the smelting of minerals is sex, do you?" And I emphatically answer yes to these questions and all other questions concerning the interchange of motion of any kind. Water vapor rising into the heavens expresses the sex desire for balance in the negative direction of motherhood, and its recondensation into raindrops expresses the sex desire for balance in the positive direction of fatherhood, which it finds only to lose it again perpetually by the purpose of repeating sex interchange between opposite mates. I could continue writing hundreds of pages of other examples of interchanging motion between every pair of opposite conditions in nature or in human activities, and the answer would always be the same. Whether such mates be buyer and seller, producer and consumer, alkali and acids, heat and cold, anode and cathode, matter and space, compression and expression, the singing of the bird or the explosion of dynamite. From now on, cease thinking of matter and motion in any such terms as those implied when we speak of attraction or repulsion, in relation to the seeming effect of the moon on the tides. Likewise, cease thinking of matter or any of its attributes in terms of energy. Matter has no attraction for other matter, nor does matter repel matter, nor is there energy in either motion or matter. Basic sex thinking. Let us again return to the basis of the divine Trinity. God's mind knows. This fact of nature you must fully comprehend. I will briefly state the basis of that cosmic fact now and amplify it later. The only reason that matter moves is because it is out of balance with its equilibrium and must find its lost balance in the universal equilibrium where it can find rest. When thus moving, it expresses the energy of its source, but the energy thus manifested is in the source and not in the motion. If matter is in balance, it cannot move without losing its balance. That is as true of a planet which floats in its orbit as it is of you who must lose and find your balance in order to walk, or a stone falling to earth. The continuous moving of a planet is due to its perpetual seeking for balance, which it forever loses as it forever finds it. This applies to all things in nature, for motion is impossible except through interchange between the two unbalanced sex conditions. Likewise, motion cannot be repeated in any effect in nature except through finding balance, such as losing your balance to move, and finding it again, move, or finding balance in sex interchange, to lose it again, to repeat sex interchange in continuous cycles. I again repeat this incontrovertible fact that in every phenomena of motion in nature, from the birth of a violet to the unfolding of a stellar nebula, this principle is absolute. Matter in balance is sexless until again out of balance, just as humans are sexless when balanced by sex interchange, until again being sex conditioned by sex division. All unbalanced sex divided matter is either moving in the positive direction of fatherhood or in the negative direction of motherhood to find balance in the sexless equilibrium of father-motherhood. This is important for you to remember until I amplify it later, for there are only two directions in nature, and those two directions are the inward and outward directions of sex interchange between unbalanced pairs of opposite conditioned mates, which are seeking sex balance through each other. We will have much more to say regarding this fact of nature later as we proceed, for all matter in the entire universe is divided into sex-conditioned mates, which are forever attempting to void their opposition by sex interchange through each other. Basic sex thinking. Let us again return to the divine trinity of creation and creator, and retrace our steps, for in it is the basis of sex. We will repeat, God's mind knows. Mind knowing is the undivided one, the balanced one. God's mind thinks. Mind thinking is the divided two, the unbalanced two. Mind thinks because of desire of mind to manifest what it knows. The light of mind knowing is magnetic. It is the light of the spiritual consciousness. The magnetic light is the light of your soul, which is the universal soul of the one Supreme Being. Now we shall give other words to the three of the divine Trinity. These other words are these: two, centered by the one, which means the sex condition two centered by the sexless one. These words for the divine Trinity are given so that you will better understand God's words in the divine Iliad, which will I again repeat. For behold, I am within all things, centering them, and I am without all things, controlling them. This simple fact must be thoroughly understood in order that the great simplicity of God's created universe can be known to you. As an example of the above words for the divine Trinity, think of the center of gravity of this earth. Then think of its two oppositely directed extensions to the north and south magnetic poles on the outer surface of the planet. Now, if you will think of these three zeros of rest in the words of the divine Iliad just quoted, you will better understand that there is not one thing in nature, not even one microscopic cell in your body, nor the slightest action of your body, nor of your thinking, nor of a grain of dust on a butterfly's wing, that is not thus centered, and its interchange balanced by God's light of universal consciousness and controlled by God's two watchful eyes from without. God's pair of opposites. Now we come to an amazing statement which I have tried to prepare for you, and which must still be gradually unfolded and clarified in order for you to begin to grasp that great simplicity which lies behind the all-knowing, which you could timelessly receive if you were fully illumined with cosmic consciousness. The greater your ability to see it as I tell it to you, the wider the doors to the light will open unto you. Your senses have built this tremendous complexity which does not exist in your knowing. The infinite complexity of the cosmos is composed of infinite reflected and repeated extensions, just as the infinite complexity of the kaleidoscope is similarly composed. For this reason, I ask each of you to burn the following statement into your consciousness by many readings and much meditation, followed by thinking your new knowing into many improvised examples until the fundamentals of creation will be as simple to you as they have been made known to me by the light which you and I are. In this sex-divided electric wave universe of seeming countless complex pairs of opposite effects, forms, conditions, and directions of motion, there are but two effects from which their infinite complexities extend. Just pause and think of this. Think of the thousands of forms of animal and vegetable life, effects of sound, the ocean crashing on the sand, the songs of birds, the wind blowing cold against your cheek, the roar of the avalanche, the ice of the one pole, and the inconceivable beat of the sun's center. All of the countless effects of creation, which arise from their one cause in their Creator, spring from just one pair of opposite effects, which are mental concentration and decentration. Mind knowing and mind thinking are all that is, and all matter is but an electric record of mind thinking. Knowing is undivided, thinking is divided into two, hence its simplicity. But these two are multiplied indefinitely, hence their complexity. Many different words are used to express the same thing, which confuse you. However, you need not be confused if you will but remember that the solution of every complex effect, whether chemical, electrical, astronomical, social, or that business problem which you are now facing, lies somewhere within the balance of unbalance between the concentrative or decentrative thinking, which motivates the heartbeat of the universe. Concentration is an effect of gathering a very large volume of rarefied matter like gases or light rays which you cannot see, into a small volume which compresses it into solid matter or focal point of light which you can see. Visibility is an effect of contraction, and contraction heats, and that is the way that God's concentrative thinking gathers hot incandescent suns together in space to create his visible universe of objective forms. God's decentrative thinking surrounds those suns with cold, dark, evacuated, and invisible space. So from concentration and decentration, we now have other pairs of opposite effects which mean exactly the same thing. These are contraction and expansion, and matter and space, and hot and cold, and solidity and vacuity, and light and dark. All of these pairs or opposites mean the same thing, concentration and decentration, and each are expressions of divided father-motherhood into father and motherhood. Likewise, all have the same purpose, and that purpose is to fulfill the desire of mind to give sex-conditioned body forms to mind imagining. Concentration builds formed bodies by contraction, while decentration dissolves them. Let us repeat this sentence in other words of the same meaning. Generation builds formed bodies by contraction, while degeneration dissolves them by expansion. Let us again repeat it in other words. Gravitation builds formed body, while radiation dissolves them. Words of the same meaning are integration and disintegration, inward and outward, attraction and repulsion, composing and decomposing, accumulating and dissipating, assembling and distributing, absorbing and emanating, charging and discharging, density and tenuity, solution and dissolution, storing and leaking, appearance and disappearance, visibility and invisibility. The generic term which we will henceforth use for the pairs of opposite expressions of any idea is polarity, or north and south. The two terms used to distinguish one extreme of polarity from the other extremes are positive and negative. Concentration is positive. Decentration is negative. The male is positive. The female is negative. As you master this idea, you will better be equipped to comprehend how and why matter emerges from space, to construct forms, and how and why space swallows up matter to dissolve its form. Likewise, you will comprehend how to give form to your conception and imagining, making them stepping stones for greater and greater achievement. This knowledge is your power when your soul knows it. So do not let these words be just photographically impressed upon your brain. Meditate upon them in communion with your mind, which is God's mind, until you know them instead of just remembering them. A perfect example of rhythmic, balanced interchange between concentration and decentration, as expressed in the heavens. Your thinking and God's thinking are one, and the electric process is the same. As all matter is a record of universal thought, so are the effects which are recorded, an indication of the balanced or unbalanced nature of the thoughts which they record. This is a thought wave universe in its entirety. Every thought of yours or of God's has a patterned body. The form, measure, intensity, nature of the body is in one form, measure, intensity, nature of the thought. Figure 10 records balanced thinking. Its prototype in the elements is to be found in carbon or silicon. Its prototype in humans would be found in the genius while in a high state of inspiration. Example of chaotic imbalance in the universe. Chaos and unbalance which upsets the normally or rhythmic balanced interchange in your life likewise upsets the balance of interchange throughout all nature in its every effect. Catastrophic effects in human revelation are due to the same causes that cyclones, avalanches, and volcanic eruptions are due in nature. The above picture finally illustrates the effects of disorderly thinking, ill-chosen sex mating, unbalance between sensual and spiritual thinking, over-emotional explosions, fears, worries, hatreds, and such brooding as self-pity. Such unbalanced thinking leads to insanity. Figures 12 and 13 are example of orderly balance, concentration, and decentration upon a macrocosmic scale. The building of balanced bodies in the heavens is the same in principle as the building of your body. Orderly balanced thinking builds normally balanced body. Every condition of your life reflects your thinking. The secret of glorious living lies in rhythmic, balanced interchange. An excellent example of vagueness and indecision recorded in nature. Everywhere in nature, the vagueness and weakness of nebulous, negative thinking and unbalanced interchange between unbalanced mates is recorded in every cell of matter which composes every body or any mass. This record of nebulous interchange between opposite conditions of concentration and decentration is as evident in the unstable chemical elements and compounds as it is in the masses of weak, unstable humans who follow leaders and have no ability to make decisions on their own. End of lesson. Lesson 11. How to think. Thinking scientifically explained. As a prelude to the following lessons, I would like to impress upon you the fact that this is a thought wave universe. All matter and masses of matter are the bodies of thought. Thinking is for the purpose of building thought bodies for thought imagining and creating bodies from matter to image those thoughts. Your body is the image of your thinking. Its state of health or strength is a record of your thinking. If you inherited an imperfect body, you can think your knowing in the direction of its perfection. Your business and social life, likewise, is the image of your thinking. Whatever its form, it is your form. Whatever its body, it is your body. The standard and status of mankind is the record of world thinking. Whatever its status, it is the image of world thinking. Remember this, however, you can think only that which you know. Your power lies in knowledge. Your ability to express that power in building bodies lies in what knowledge your consciousness is aware of. You can continually transform yourself and your life condition only through continually acquiring greater knowledge. And by knowledge I mean knowledge, not information, theory, affirmations, or platitudes. By knowledge I mean that which you can dynamically and scientifically explain and then demonstrate. By knowledge I mean cause, and by thinking I mean the power to think cause into balanced effect in the perfect image of cause. Consider how mankind has continually been transformed by greater knowledge of cause, which has enabled him to more and more control effect. Think of mankind's state of ignorance when bubonic plague decimated him by the millions. Think of his endeavors to meet a catastrophe by magic, by witch doctors and rituals based upon superstition and religious fanaticism. And think of the gross ignorance which made religious fanaticism possible in the medieval days of the Inquisition and in modern days of only 2 centuries ago when women were burned alive for witchcraft. Now think of what the last 100 years of scientific knowledge has done and is doing to lengthen and transform lives and standard of living through increasingly greater obedience to God's law, and more especially to rid the world of superstition and belief in the supernatural. Think also of the fact that our ability to obey God's law is based upon the measure of our knowledge of what God's law is. The eternal spiritual man is the magnetic light which God is. Man's knowing is centered in the seat of his consciousness, which is located in the center of his head between the right and left lobes of the brain. Man's sensing and thinking is an electric interchange in waves which concentrate and decentrate in varying intensity in the obedience to the sense demand of his body or of the specific desires of his mind. That is why I say you must have greater knowledge of what God's law is, and how it is manifested through the building of thought images and bodies. This you can get only through the scientific approach. You can never know God through the emotions. Just as science conquered smallpox and other dread scourges through knowledge of cause, where magic and witchcraft fail, so must you acquire God's power through scientific knowledge of cause, where affirmations, emotional worship, and faith and belief have failed to get you farther than a peephole into the light. Affirmations are but one step ahead of magic, for they but record wishful thinking instead of action based upon knowing. Likewise, the abstractions of metaphysics may even state immortal truth without one's knowing the meaning of those truths. And so I say to you who may think of yourself as not scientific-minded, that it is because of a wrong concept of science. When you find that science is simple, and you will find it more and more simple as we proceed, you will feel its might behind your every thought and action as it continually transforms you, as inevitably as it has transformed medieval man to modern man. You've already seen in the last chapter how many complex effects arising from many seemingly different principles are but one effect arising from one principle. As we proceed, you will find complexity continually folding up and utterly disappearing in the same simplicity. As an example of this, you now think of the countless many forms, conditions, and directions of matter in motion. You will find, to your amazed and joyful surprise, that there are but two forms in all nature, two conditions and two directions. And even these pairs of opposites arise from the same effect of concentrative and decentrative thinking. For the two conditions are the polarized positive and negative pressure conditions of divided father-motherhood. The two directions are the inward-outward direction of sex interchange between the divided father and mother, and the two forms are the balanced forms of the cube of motherhood and the sphere of the divine fatherhood of creation. Having thus told you these things, it is my earnest desire that in your search for the light of cosmic conscious awareness, you will give the effort to it with the same inner ecstasy that a composer gives to his as yet unwritten symphony, which will require much effort given and love to it before it has a body built by him in his own image. The two directions of thinking. Thinking is a two-way interchange of motion between the divided pair of sex-conditioned opposites, the positive father condition and the negative mother condition, which will hereafter simplify by using the terms positive and negative. The positive condition of concentrative thinking pulls inward from within toward a focal center. The negative condition of decentrative thinking thrusts outward from the same center. These are the only two directions of change in this electrically divided universe. They are the electric directions of inward toward north and the outward direction toward south. These are the two directions of the universal heartbeat and your heartbeat. They are the directions of your inward and outward breathing and of every other effective motion in the universe. There is no effective motion in the universe which is not in effect an outward and inward explosion, whether that effect be the quick effect of dynamite or the slow one of the decay of a tree. The two directions of an explosion are outward toward south and inward toward north. The point of north in matter is its center of gravity. It is the focal center of concentrated thinking. It is the point of maximum compression, maximum heat and incandescence, and the highest potential of the mass. South is every radical direction away from north. South reaches out into space around every planet and sun. South is the radial direction of decentrated thinking. The farther away south reaches from north, the colder it becomes, the lower its potential, the less dense the mass until density disappears in gases and vapors of cold, dark space. This is a two-way radial universe. Because of the two opposed directions of concentrative, decentrative thinking, the entire visible universe is composed of spheres. No other form is possible because of it. We shall later see that the cube of space is the only possible form in the invisible universe, and for the same reason. We have not yet reached the point where this can be made clear, for we have not yet arrived at the point where we can begin to discuss waves, wave fields, and the working of opposed pressures in creating a curved universe of two-way spiral interweaving. When we do reach that point of God's simple plan will seem more simple to you because of the impossibility of exceeding the principle of the divine Trinity in any effect whatsoever. What about East and West? It is quite natural that you should ask me about East and West, for you have been accustomed to these four directions all your life. That is because you are upon a sphere, and you are forever traveling around that sphere. Consider this for a moment. No matter which direction you go around this spherical earth, you will come back to a point you started from. And at every step of your journey, you have been in an unchanging relation to the center of gravity. Every point on the surface of the earth is 15 pounds pressure, no matter how many thousands of miles you travel. Therefore, around is not a direction of change. That is true of every spherical strata above and below the earth. Science terms this equal pressure gradient. Clouds float around the earth in equal pressure gradients, and an airplane set for a straight course likewise curves around the earth in an unchanging pressure gradient. That is not true of the two radial direction of God's electric thinking, for each inch in either of the two opposed directions bring you to a continually changing condition. If you travel a few miles away from the earth, you can no longer breathe, and you will turn to ice, while you could travel forever around the earth and still be in the same pressure. The why of these two directions, the purpose which these two directions fulfill, is to manifest the law of love. This law is expressed by giving and regiving. The inward direction gives love from the mother to the father. The outward direction gives love from the father to the mother. The inward direction gives the seed of light from the father to the mother for the forming of bodies. All bodies are but waves of light. The outward direction unfolds the seed from the womb of the mother for refolding by the father in every pulsation of the electric heartbeat of this pulsating universe. The unfolding expands, the refolding compresses. All bodies are created by interchange between expansion and contraction. That is the way bodies are born from earth, are given to the heavens, and the heavens regive them to earth for reborning. That is the thought cycle which we call life and death. You breathe in to live and out to die. Growth is inward toward earth and decay is outward toward space. This fact needs further explanation, which will come later. The entire universe of formed, visible, compressed bodies appears from invisibility by the concentrative action of thinking and disappears into formless invisibility by the decentrative reaction of thinking. All pairs of opposites are the same. Let us now return to the list of the many pairs of opposites cited in lesson number 10 to demonstrate their oneness in principle and purpose. Instead of using the words concentration and decentration, I will substitute the words charge and discharge, which have the same meaning. In the same connection, I will use the words male and female, compression and expansion, and generation and degeneration. When you go to the garage to ask them to charge your battery, you actually mean that you want them to charge the positive cell and discharge the negative cell in order to create the two opposite conditions which are necessary for motion. When you say that your storage battery is dead, it means exactly the same thing as when you stop thinking. It means that your mind is in equilibrium. It is not extending thought waves. It is undivided. An equilibrium must be divided in order to move. The moment you begin to think, you are interchanging the positively charged condition of your thought battery with the negatively discharged part of it. There is no such condition in nature as negative charge. That would be equivalent to saying expanded compression, or to tell one to go north-south, or to boil, freeze this water. Positive charge makes solid bodies from space, and negative discharge gives them back to space. To generate also means to charge, or to compress, or to heat, or to contract, while degeneration means to discharge, expand, cool, or evacuate. Likewise, gravitation is another word for concentration, and radiation is another word for decentration. Interchange between these two opposites integrates and disintegrates the universe into solids surrounded by ethers. These pair of opposites do not mean pairs of opposite things. It means pairs of opposite conditions. And all of these conditions are sex conditions. All of them are pressure conditions resulting from the division of an equilibrium into two unbalanced opposites in all matter. These two opposite pressures of expansion and contraction, which generate bodies into solid form and then radiate them into formlessness, are the basis of electricity. That is what electricity is, a series of opposing strains between the opposing pressures of compression and expansion, which simultaneously divide a balanced condition into two equal and opposed unbalanced conditions, and sequentially restores them to balance for endless repetition. The science of thinking continued, the heartbeat of the universe. How often we hear the abstract statement that we must have faith and belief in abundant supply, which will surely come. Abstract statements without knowledge back of them may be comforting for the emotional person, but the intellectual demands more explanation than faith and belief in an abstract, unexplained statement. There will be several more chapters on the scientific explanation of God's thinking process, telling why there is an abundant supply, and how to get that abundant supply, also to clearly demonstrate that most people are shutting off that abundant supply because they have not the slightest idea of what it all means. Whenever you ask for something or desire something to take place, you naturally think of your desire being possibly fulfilled afterward, and you do not even feel sure of that afterward. You hope so, but are not sure. I wish to make it perfectly clear that you already have that for which you ask. It has already come to you simultaneously with the asking. That seems incredible, even amazing, but it is true nevertheless. This fact is stated in God's message of the Divine Iliad in the following words from the Book of the Desire, chapter 6, 32-33. Desire ye what ye will, and behold, it standeth before thee. Throughout the eons it has been thine without thy knowing, and though thou hast but just asked for it. Sit thou not and ask, acting not, for unless thou reach out for thy desire, it shall not walk thy way to thee, unaided by thy strong arm. Think of it this way. In God's undivided mind universe, the one whole idea of creation is complete. It has no relation to time, sequence, or separateness. When you ask for anything, you are asking for a separate unit of that one whole idea. In other words, you are separating from it that which you want, and that you can do timelessly in your own mind. You can vision it as a reality in your own undivided mind universe. You can immediately know your idea and immediately fulfill it mentally. Thus visioning it as a concept is timeless. But you must realize that what you really want is to fulfill your desire physically. You want to give it a body. You want to manifest your mind idea by taking it into the divided universe beyond the vision of it in your imagining. That means that you have to think your idea out of your timeless knowing into a three-dimensional universe of time and space. You have to transform a substanceless form of light, which is a concept in your mind, into a body which has the substance of light waves which we think of as matter. Do I make myself clear? If not, I must make myself clear, so I will put it in other words. To desire anything is to create it, for creation is merely the giving of bodies to desires. You wish to take something from the undivided and indivisible universe of rest and project it into the divided universe of motion. The answer to this lies in the heartbeat of the universe, which seemingly divides one condition into two. I say seemingly, for it actually does not divide it. An equilibrium cannot be divided, but God's thought process have made it appear to be divided. This mystery will gradually become clear as we proceed. We will now take the first step towards clarifying this mystery. Consider your own heartbeat. It pulses inward, then outward. It compresses, then expands. Your senses tell you that, just as clearly as your senses tell you that the pendulum swing one way, then the other way afterward. Likewise, your senses tell you that the piston of a compression-expansion engine moves toward compression, then the other way afterward. The important thing which your senses do not tell you is as yet unknown fact that compression and expansion take place simultaneously, and that which follows afterward is a repetition of the same effect in reverse. In other words, that stroke of the piston which you do see is moving in the opposite direction simultaneously, but that opposite move you cannot see, but you can know it. And from henceforth you must know it, for in the knowing is the explanation of the fact that anything you ask of God is simultaneously answered in the thought universe in which you asked of it. While asking it, you already have it, but you do not know it. All you now have to do is to give it a body through equal cooperation with God. But this is where you fail, for you do not yet realize that at the precise second of the beginning of your desire, God also began the fulfillment of it in the actual measure of your desire. God continues to fulfill it with you until you yourself stop fulfilling it or work against it yourself unknowingly. As an actual fact, that which you desired is already surveyed and patterned in space in the measure of your desire and in its pattern. The as yet unfolded patterned seed of it is already there in the real universe, ready for unfolding, just as the patterned seed of the oak is ready for unfolding into the body of a big oak. The seed concept of the oak will not unfold into the divided universe of body form, however, until the divided body does its part to make it unfold. If the electrically divided universe does not do its part to divide that concept of the oak into a body, that oak will not then be born into the body universe, even though the surveyed measure and pattern form still exists in space eternally as part of the one whole idea, and can have a body whenever the earth body will provide the condition to born it. The Creator will always do his equal part in the fulfilling of any desire of earth or heaven, but earth and heaven must do their part in fulfilling desire of earth and heaven. To take one first step in further explaining how to think your desire into the form of the desire, I must change a fundamental law somewhat radically. This is the law. Action and reaction are equal and opposite. This law is misleading because it infers that the reaction follows the action sequentially. That means that the reaction to that particular action takes place after the action has taken place. The truth is that the reaction to every action takes place simultaneously. Then both are simultaneously repeated afterward. The repetition is another action and reaction. It is actually another wave unit. The following words would better describe this law of conservation. Action and reaction are equal and opposite, and are expressed simultaneously. Sequentially, they are repeated in reverse, the reaction becoming the action and the action the reaction. The importance of your fully understanding this fundamental of new thinking cannot be overestimated. When you do understand it, the mysteries which have confounded you will disappear. Even such mysteries as life and death will disappear for you. Patiently concentrate, then equally decentrate in meditation sufficiently. You will find the answers to all mysteries within yourself. So as you read and do not quite get what you read, continue to read, for that which is vague in the first reading may be made clear in the very next paragraph or in the next lesson. For all seeming complexity will gradually become more simple as you more and more understand the equality of interchange which underlies the principle of the Divine Trinity. If you were taking a 4-year university course, you would not expect to know today what you will know next month and the next. In this 1-year course, you will know more in 1 year and gain more personal mastery for creative expression than you could possibly gain in 1,000 years of accumulating so-called empirical knowledge, which means conclusions arrived at through observation of the senses. The more you understand the Divine Trinity, the more you will realize that creation is but a thought universe of thought-imagined forms recorded by thought into material body form. One great step in helping you to understand the Divine Trinity is to make you know that each of the seeming divided pairs of opposites in the universe are born from the other, and each sequentially becomes the other. This may seem amazing, but it is true. Life and death are born from each other and become the other, just as heat and cold or compression and expansion likewise do. This universe which seems to be divided cannot be divided. Nothing in this zero universe of rest can exceed zero, although it can seem to exceed 0 by 9. You cannot add 1 milligram to this universe, nor to yourself, although then you can seem to add to it by subtracting from it that which you add. Likewise, if you think you are multiplying units of anything to this universe, you will find that you have only seemed to do so by dividing it equally. This is a zero universe of light at rest which cannot be divided, nor can its zero be exceeded. That zero is the light of your mind, which is God's mind. Beyond it there is nothing. The light of love is all that is. End of lesson. Lesson number 12. Answer to students' questions. All questions are answered in light. Thou art light, thou canst answer them. I repeat these glorious words from the divine Iliad because the promise in them is a constant reminder that the answer to every question lies within yourself. Complete knowledge, or omniscience, centers your consciousness, but the unfolding awareness is a process which is measured by the intensity of your desire. Let me remind you that when you search for the answer to anything which confuses you, search for it in cause and never in effect. A doctor who would try to cure an effect by another effect would be but experimenting. I often feel like telling you that if every question in the world had to be answered, and every problem solved by just one word, that one glorious word would be balance. Balance is the key to the answer, or the solution for any problem whatsoever arises from an interchange between the two opposite extensions of the zero of balance. Therefore I say to you, first ask yourself the question you would ask of me, or of any other person, and see if the answer is not clearly in yourself. Go back to that zero of balance, just as the bookkeeper in the bank extends his credits and debits from that zero until they balance. As these lessons proceed, there will come many questions as to things which you do not at first clearly see. You will find, however, that the answer to that which now confuses you will be found in the next lesson or the next, but is within you now, if you took it back to the zero of cause in balance from which it is extended. I assure you that I am glad to answer any questions you ask, but it will be of greater benefit to you if you would first meditate upon it after first desiring the answer from within yourself. Among the many questions I have received, the following are the most typical. Question: I am deeply confused regarding my own individual soul and what you term the universal soul. If my individual soul, which I assume I have, is part of the universal soul, as one drop of water in a part of the ocean, how can it still be my individual soul for reincarnating as such when it loses its identity to the universal soul, as a drop of water loses its identity when put back into the ocean? Answer: this question is ahead of the lessons, but a brief answer will not only help satisfy your curiosity and remove part of the veil of your confusion, but will help prepare you for the lesson when it does come. The answer is that God has a wonderful bookkeeping system to record all the thoughts and actions of his imagined universe of seemingly separate things. All thoughts are recorded permanently in a manner which will be explained later. Every thought, every desire, and every action of yours is what constitutes your individuality. They are electrically recorded in a state of motion which surrounds that still center of consciousness which is your soul, just as a still center of gravity is surrounded by moving matter of earth. If your individuality consists of thoughts and actions somewhat different from your thoughts and actions of another individual, you cannot compare your individuality with a drop of water which has no individual desires to pattern itself differently from other drops in the ocean. You can better use the seed of a rose as an example, for the rose has desires and actions which pattern its folding and unfolding. The rose seed which you see is just plain matter of earth, and when you return it to the earth, it is as much the earth as the drop of water is the ocean. But there is something in that seed which you do not see and cannot see. In that seed is the same rose, refolded, awaiting its unfolding in a new body with matter of earth. That which you did see of the seed is only food for the unfolding embryo rose. It is as much earth of earth as a drop of water is water of ocean. But out of the same earth 10,000 times 10,000 individual forms appeared, because they are 10,000 times 10,000 individual records of desire in that earth. Question: I quote from Prelude, page 4. And each one of every opposite pair not only balances with its opposite, but borns its opposite through sequential interchange. Does this mean that we are alternately male and female from incarnation to incarnation? Answer: this question is partially explained in lesson number 11 and will be completed in lesson number 13, 14, and 15. Every male is also female, and every female is also male, for every unit of everything is polarized with both opposites. The male-female conditions are continually interchanging in each polarized body in every cycle of every wavelength. When you breathe in, you are charging your body towards strengthening the fatherhood idea of you. Out of that opposite, the motherhood idea springs in your outbreathing. In that one cycle, you have expressed both conditions. That same interchange of alternation takes place in every thought cycle, as well as your whole life cycle. You confuse the male-female term with the thought terms of concentration and decentration. It is not the male and female which interchange, it is their condition. Interchange balances the opposed positive and negative conditions, but does not void the male or female body. A key is male and a lock is female, so are a model and a mold of it. A male body may be predominantly negative, and a female body may be predominantly positive. Homosexuality arises from such unbalanced conditions which begin in the fetus. Alternation in sequential incarnation is a question of recorded desires for expression. To illustrate what I mean by this, consider the musician whose every thought during a lifetime is concerned with musical rhythm. His soul record would repeat itself in his desires, and he would undoubtedly recollect and repeat his desires in the next incarnation. As to the sex of his body, that depends entirely upon the interchange of the forming fetus, but strongly positive desires recorded in the soul seed will be reproduced with a strongly positive body, probably male, but a female would produce a very positive character. Question. Please define what you mean by mind, self, and mind-self, consciousness and cosmic consciousness, intellect and intelligence and light. Answer. By mind and light, I mean that which is God. It is the still, magnetic, invisible light from which the two visible lights of the divided electric thought universe extend. These two lights of motion are the same, for they are electric waves. When the direction of motion is inward, toward gravity, however, the light increases in intensity from the blackness of space through the red end of the spectrum to incandescence at the center of gravity because of ever-shortening waves. When the direction of light is outward from incandescence toward space, its luminosity lowers gradually through the blue end of the spectrum to the blackness of space. Put it more simply, I might say that there is but one light which is divided into appear to be two. Consciousness means the same as light in mind, but its connotation suggests awareness or cognizance of itself. Cosmic consciousness means an awareness of the cosmos, of creation and its process and purpose. Intelligence is knowing. God is the great intelligence, which is all-knowing. Any man's intellect is the measure of his awareness of God in him, which means the measure of his knowing. Question. Lesson 1, page 7. You speak of all things extending from each other. Do you mean that a body is created, which in turn creates another body? Answer. No, that is not at all my meaning. I mean that there are not two separate or separable things in the universe. Everything in it's extended from every other thing. You, for example, are the blade of grass on a pampas prairie, or the far thermostat star, or the ice cap on Mars. Your heartbeat is the heartbeat of every living thing. If you move your little finger, you move the whole universe. Everything in the universe is indissoluble bound to everything else in it by invisible flux threads of light. Question. At 65, I find myself in a quandary as to what to do to improve my personal economic conditions. My friends all advise me so differently that I do not know which advice to follow. Can you enlighten me? Answer. Ask God about it. He will tell you, for the answer is in yourself. No one can advise you who does not make your problem his very own, and that is too rare a happening. You cannot tell them the whole of your problem, even if you try. The more you refrain from telling others about your problems and spend that time in communion with God, the stronger you will become as your own leader. In the divine Iliad are these words, See me, know me, be thou fulcrum of thine own power. That is your path to your own independence. Question. On page 27 you say, when God decentrates his thinking, those body forms expand into disappearance to reappear when God reconcentrates his thinking. Is this the reason one dies at the time he does, because God withdraws his thinking from this one? Answer: no, that is not the reason he dies, for God never withdraws his thinking. There are two directions to thinking, just as there are two directions of a piston and a pump. The compressive direction concentrates to form bodies, while the expansive direction dissolves them. The pump does not stop pumping while it expands, nor does God stop thinking when he decentrates. The reaction is a part of the action in all things. You will find diagrams in lesson number 13, 14, and 15, which will clarify this much more distinctly. Question: some parts of the day I find myself doing wonderful work. It goes fast and I feel sure of myself. At other times, however, I seem to lose my power and skill, and I make many mistakes which annoy me. Could you tell me what is the matter? Has it anything to do with instability to concentrate? Answer: your trouble is not inability to concentrate, but inability to balance both swings of the pendulum of your thinking. When you are doing good work joyfully, and it is going fast with but few mistakes, it is because you are concentrating normally after a period of decentration or rest. When you start work in the morning, you will find a period of freshness which will last for 2 or 3 hours of normal routine work. Staleness then sets in because you do not balance your concentrative effort. If you open up your thinking to a stopping point, expand it. Stop thinking of anything for just a few minutes. You will find that you can go on for another period of 2 or 3 hours. And you can keep that up during a whole day of 8 or 10 hours if you take brief intervals of unwinding the tensity of your concentrative thinking. Just stop and look out the window or off into the sky for even a brief period, and your tenseness will unwind just like unwinding a watch spring. Your ability to utterly decentrate, even for a second, will multiply your power to concentrate. Have you noticed that a spontaneous speaker will sometimes pause for even 1 second? A blank look comes into his face for just that second of intense concentration in which he gets more from the blue than he can tell you in the next half hour. He decentrated to seek inspiration and idea timelessly for him to unfold over a period of time. All knowledge comes timelessly, but it takes time to express it. Question: can you decentrate and continue to work? Answer: no, unless your work is pure automatic routine, such as working on an assembly line. The more creative your work is, which requires you to think, the more you need to decentrate to get more knowledge for you to think into form. The inventor, business executive, and musician whose work is creative absolutely must subordinate sensed existence to mind. They must know before they think. A concept for what you desire to do must precede the thinking of it, and the thinking must precede the action of giving it a body. But you cannot continue to decentrate, to conceive and give bodies to your thought at the same time unless your work is automatic and you're an automaton. Question: what do you personally do in your work to concentrate and decentrate? Answer: I take the most important work first. If that work is a portrait sitting, I start it full of the vigor which follows a long night of decentration, which is rest from thinking and rest of body, reinvigorated by 2 hours of walking, riding, or skating. I work for 2 hours, for experience tells me that I can do creative work for 2 hours, then I stop, decentrate for a short time, and can do equally well at something else for 2 hours, and I can do that continually for 10 to 14 hours without ever feeling fatigued. During a 2-hour sitting, I pause every half hour or so, not timed by the clock, but by my feeling, and decentrate fully. My favorite way of utterly relaxing is to go to the piano and improvise for a short period. When I then go back to my sitting, I see things with a fresh eye, to use a familiar term, which means that the prolonged period of concentration had dulled my perception during the half-hour period of concentrative work. Question: could you give an example of concentration and decentration in some material form other than mental to help us understand it better? Yes, I could give you thousands of such examples. Consider a big log of wood. In that dense form, it is concentrated. Put it in the fire and it decentrates to gas and smoke. Consider a bowl of water. It is concentrated. Stand it in the sun for a few hours and it disappears. It has decentrated. Question: But that is only contraction and expansion. Are they the same effects? Answer: exactly. Everything in nature is either concentrating or decentrating. Call it contraction or expansion if you wish for what it is, except for the fact that the connotation of the words make it necessary to apply concentration and decentration to a mental effect to one's thinking, while compression and expansion are better words to use as applied to the same effect in an engine. You could use the words high and low potential if you were speaking in electric terms, and they would mean just the same thing. Likewise, condensation and evaporation would mean the same thing if you were referring to water. Question: if that is so, wouldn't the words generation and radiation mean the same thing? Answer: exactly. Or you could say hot or cold, or matter and space, or solidity and tenuity, or any other pairs of words which means opposite conditions, depending upon what you are talking about. Connotations differ, but the principle does not differ. They all mean the same thing: definite form versus indefinite form. When you concentrate, you give definite form to your concept. You give it a solid body, so to speak. When you decentrate, you expand your thinking into the indefinite, formless world. Then you concentrate to give your idea a definite body form. Question: I can see how all the words apply exact except hot and cold. I cannot in any way connect them with concentration or decentration. Please explain. Answer: you asked me if concentration and decentration were not analogous to compression and expansion. You must have understood that. You also must know that compression and contraction heat while expansion cools. If you could but cease thinking of many words and many things and think instead of the one simple principle which governs all effects. My greatest desire is to remove the useless and needless complexity from your thoughts and actions. The more I can induce you to form the habit of thinking in terms of the universal heartbeat, which pumps inward and thrusts outward, or of your breathing, which also pumps inward to compress and thrusts outward to expand, so that it can again compress, the farther you will go into life. You can go farther in 1 hour by ceasing to take up your valuable time trying to think things out, or to reason them out, instead of getting back to the zero of all-knowing mind, where you will be given the knowledge you desire to achieve your purpose directly, instead of the indirect method of thinking or reasoning it out. Question: I wish you would explain that idea further. I always thought it was absolutely imperative that we think and reason things out. Answer: if you know a thing, you can then take it apart by thinking it into form through action. But if you only half know a thing, or do not know it at all, but try to think it out, by comparing one condition or thing or experience with another, you have but guessed or experimented. You may come out right, or pretty nearly right, for a long way from right. If, on the other hand, you take a little walk in the woods or talk with God about it, you will not need to guess or to reason or to think it out. Always remember that your mind can tell you more in a minute than your senses can tell you in years. Question: please explain that last statement. What have the senses got to do with thinking or reasoning it out? Answer: if you are deeply inspired with knowledge or have conceived an idea while in the light, you do not need to waste time thinking it out or reasoning it out. You know it, and you immediately proceed from there. It is only when you do not know it that you putter around and waste time by taking sensed records of information gleaned from books, from experience and events, and stored in your brain. Like a lot of pieces in a cut-out puzzle picture, you try to piece them together into some sort of tangible whole by what you call reasoning or thinking. What you are really doing is sensing, not reasoning, nor even thinking. You are remembering and repeating sensed records by cutting them apart and trying to fit the jagged fragments of parts together. You can produce only one result that way. You produce one more piece of mediocrity for the world's wastebasket. If you actually knew your concept, you would think it out knowingly with perfection in every action if your work was the result of divine inspiration. You would then produce a masterpiece in 1/10 of the time you wasted in reasoning out a soulless creation. You can have no better illustration of that than my colossal figure of Jesus, which I did in 4 months, without an assistant, as against the normal time required by a sculptor of 2 years, with an assistant who worked by himself alone without God. Added to the time saving, one's work is always a masterpiece who works knowingly with God's mind and hands, and never can be a masterpiece otherwise. Question. During your illumination, you spoke of knowing the unreality of the material universe. You knew it to be an illusion. Please tell us more about this. How could you know that, and how could God tell you that it is not real? Answer. I will not only tell you how I knew it timelessly, but how God commanded that I think that knowledge into words to project into the three-dimensional world of time and space for you and others to know. In my story of that experience, you'll remember that I said that I knew instantly and timelessly the one whole idea of God's knowing and desiring. You'll remember also that I told of my awareness of the universal heartbeat. That awareness of the universal heartbeat had within it the full awareness that the heartbeat was the electric pulsation of God's thinking. I knew that God's thinking is but a mirage which gives imagined forms to his ideas, and therefore had no more reality than a lot of imagined forms which you might conjure into your mind had any reality. God commanded that I write down this idea for you and others. That is why he kept me in that condition of severance for 39 days, so I would have time to write down things which needed to be projected into a universe of time. I will quote God's words, written through me in the divine Iliad, where very much pertaining to this idea were written. Behold in me the one, inseparable. Two things there are not in my universe, there is but me. Everything that is of every other thing that is. Nothing is of itself alone. All things are indissolubly united. This is a universe of seeming, an imagined universe of thinking, an action universe of desiring. That which mind desires will appear in the image of that desire. Without thinking, my one idea could not become many, one idea for my stage setting. Without motion, my cosmic play could not be played, nor could its actors be. Without change, my undivided one idea could not unfold. Without time, my drama of my creating universe could have no sequence. Without motion, time, change, and sequence, the unfolding of my mind imagining could have no measured space for its stage setting, no screen for its light projection. Therefore, see them as I imagine them, but know that they are but unfolding patterns of my knowing through my thinking. Know thou, therefore, that time is not, nor are there moving things which change, nor is there life, nor death, nor cold, nor heat, nor good, nor bad in my universe of me. To think is to create. I create with light. Nothing is which is not light. I think idea. Light registers my idea in the two sexed lights of my thinking, and form is born in the image of my thinking. Form has no existence, nor have my imagining. These exist not, for they are not me. I alone exist, I the all. I create my imaged body with the inbreathing of my pulsing universe of me. My universe is my image, but my image is not me. All things are my image, but they are not me, even though I am in them and they in me. All through the divine Iliad, there is a constant reiteration of the fact that God alone is, and all which appears to be is but the imagined universe of illusion. Regarding illusion itself, all you need to do is to look about you, and you will see illusion everywhere. Nothing you see is what it seems to be. The railroad tracks seem to meet on the horizon, but they do not. A man in front of you seems bigger than a 20-story building behind him. The motionless cloud which floats over your head is moving at 1,000 miles per hour, yet it seems not to move. Question. Why is it that we see, hear, and feel things which seem so real to us? Answer. It is your sensed body which sees, hears, and feels. You, the person, do not see, hear, or feel. Your sensed body is motion. It is the moving electric record of thought, but thought images are recognizable only by other thought images, for thought images are electrically sensed with an electric awareness of each other. That electric awareness is not but motion, wave vibrations of motion. They do not know anything, they but feel the interchange of motion. The sense of your bodies are limited to feeling only within a certain range. They can see a pendulum swing one way, but they do not see the invisible counterpart of that pendulum swinging the other way with equal force. If the senses could record all motion, not just a limited part of it, they would see that what seems to be happening is also unhappening at the same time. For that which they see is voided by that which they do not see. This will be covered in great details later in describing the voidance principle. Question. I think I am beginning to understand, but I wish you would clarify it more. You so often refer to the unrealities of creating things. All my life I have heard metaphysical groups tell that matter is not real. In the story of your illumination you told about immediately knowing the unreality of matter. I believe it, but I do not fully know it. But when I think of a hard bar of iron, I think of it as pretty real. How can you help me know it more fully? Answer. A hard block of ice has the same seeming reality, but it will disappear into the formless state it came from very quickly in the sunshine. And so will a bar of iron disappear in the same manner if melted. Its form will disappear into formless gases, and the whole bar of iron will disappear if enough heat is applied to melt it. If you think of all solids, which you think of as so real, as but ice of substance, frozen into transient form, that will help you. When you really get it fully into your consciousness, that this is a universe of the still light of mind only, and that mind thinks imagined forms, and that all imagined forms emerge from that stillness as just thought waves of motion, it will help you someday actually to know it. Question. Your answer brings up another question. You have to apply heat to melt the ice or the bar of iron. Isn't that something else again? Answer. No, you do not apply heat as something else than the cold ice or bar of iron. The heat belongs to it, but was taken from it to freeze it. When you restore the amount of heat which was taken from it to make it freeze, you have restored its balance, which means it will have to re-given to it that which the iron bar given to melt. That means that it is returned to the formless state form, which it emerged as a bar of iron, to impress you with as something real. You can apply that formula to anything on earth, and the answer is the same. Consider a tree. The rays of the sun gradually add to its heat to the unfolding oak for half a century, and the oak gave that heat back to space as it cooled and froze into wood. Every generating pulsation of the positive half of the heartbeat, which heated, was followed by the radiating half, which cooled and thus froze the unfolding pattern into form. That pulsing process of growth continued for half a century to exclude the heat and include the cold. That process of freezing the wood fiber is the same in principle that you employ to freeze cream into ice cream. If you cut the tree down, all the heat which has been excluded will return to disintegrate the fiber over a period of many years, or you can hasten the process with a match. Please note that I use the word disintegrate. I did not say melt or dissolve or vaporize or radiate. Each of these words would have been equally right in principle, but their connotations would not have applied to wood. I could have used the words rot or decay with a proper connotation as the word disintegrate. I merely call your attention to this fact in passing because complexity of words and meanings of words add very materiality to the complexity of your ability to comprehend natural law. Question. You have spoken so many times about knowing all there is to know timelessly. No matter how I try to think it out, I cannot understand it. Everything takes at least some time to create. Could you clear that up a little for me? Answer. You are right when you say that everything creating thing takes time. For example, it takes 50 years of time to grow an oak tree from a seed. But if you look at an oak seed, you can know the oak tree which is within it timelessly. Knowledge of ideas does not belong to a three-dimensional space-time and thought universe. Knowledge of idea and the qualities which belong to the light of God's still universe of mind are timeless. It is only the expression of an idea which takes time. By expression of an idea, I mean giving it a material body. It means transforming qualities of the still light, which you cannot sense, into quantities of the moving lights which you can sense. There are a few more questions which space will not permit answering this month, but they will all be answered in succeeding months, or if too many, will be answered personally. We are more than delighted at the many letters we receive which tells us that questions which students are going to ask they have asked of themselves in meditation and found the answers within themselves. The following is typical. I formulate questions to ask you, then I study a little more and find that I myself am able to answer them. That is wonderful, and as it should be, for this home study course is not to add to your information, but to give you fundamental knowledge which is not encyclopedic, but is God's omniscience awakened in you. I therefore close this chapter as I began it by God's message to you, which says, all questions are answerable in the light. Thou art light, thou canst answer them. Treasured friends, your letters to us are marvelous. We cannot adequately describe the happiness and satisfaction they give us in knowing how much the home study course is doing for the multiplication of your power through the unfolding of your cosmic awareness. We are more especially pleased in knowing the whole families and many couples are studying the course together, some couples sharing such interest for the first time in their lives. It is wonderful you tell us that in such sharing you are finding new strength and new companionship with the sharing of the social pleasures in life cannot possibly give. There is not anything which will so bind husbands and wives as the building of themselves through each other. God planned mates for every pair of opposites for that reason. No separate individual can find complete balance in himself alone, or do his good work without the loving cooperation of a balancing mate. I found that way when God sent Lao. I did find work before that, and so did she, but immediately we began working together, the quality of our work jumped noticeably ahead, so much that our beloved friends are noticing it and commenting on it. I quote part of a letter. The lessons have been read and reread many times, and with all your writings more come out each time I read them. Though I believe that the other work of yours were unsurpassable, I was wrong, for the present group of letters are vastly deeper and more fascinating. That you have given them out to the world, we thank you. But that your beloved Lao has been the inspiration for this priceless gift makes all of us equally grateful to her. G.K., California. Another wonderful thing about the need for a balancing mate is the fact that God will always send to or lead you to the exactly right mate at the time of greatest need if you let no other motive than that of need creep into your desire. Many mismatings have been made because of motives other than need for mutual balance in all things have crept in. That is not only God's way of working, but Lao and I have been demonstrating it, even as the time element. My greatest need for Lao was in 1946, which was the time set in the Divine Iliad for beginning my teaching. And after Lao searched throughout the world for the right way to serve God and man, her need was also met at the time when destiny set it for both of us. I tell you this as a demonstration of what our teachings, as well as to share our joy and confidence with you, our friends. I tell it to you also because we know that God works equally with us, balancing our every effort when we work knowingly in balance with Him. That is partly what is meant by the promise, and all things else will be added unto you. For one who has found the kingdom of heaven, working knowingly with God's law of love, gives one the very maximum of power, peace, and happiness in all things. And most certainly with one's lifelong, moment-to-moment co-worker and companion in all things is a very important element in everyone's life. In the preceding lessons, I have been stressing the principle of balance and balanced interchange between pairs of opposites, which have lost their balance by dividing it into material bodies, and must forever seek it in the production of divided material bodies. That is what creation and the creative urge means. The following 3 lessons will deal with this subject exclusively because you will forever flounder in all your efforts until dynamic knowledge of the creative principle and balanced creative process replace the vagueness of your present guessing and experimental decisions. Until we have this knowledge, we are all well or ill, we succeed or fail, we are loved or not loved, we have happiness or misery, and do not know why. We have no control of our actions beyond our knowledge of what unbalanced them. We likewise have no control over material things or people until we have dynamic knowledge of the divided thought universe in which we operate every moment of our lives. You must fully know that all you are doing at all times is producing thought image bodies for your ideas and desires, and that you are doing it through sex exchange in this electrically sensed universe which continually produces thought bodies and nothing else. And that is all that God does. For that is what creation is. No matter who you are or what your station in life, all you do throughout life is what God does. Create formed bodies in your image for your thought imagined forms. When I speak of creating bodies, I do not mean just organic bodies of living things. I mean thought bodies of ideas, for that is what a musician gives to his idea, or an inventor to his. A housewife who creates a body for her idea of and a desire for a pie, or an architect's desire for a temple, for we all are perpetually creating bodies and not else. It is therefore of vital importance that you know how God creates bodies for his divided one idea. If you create them the same way God does, you get the maximum out of life. It is because we do not create bodies in the same way that God does, that we lose out to the degree of our lack of knowing. I hope you are going to bear with me for telling you why we have created such disorder in our individual and global lives of today. I know you will forgive me, for if you ask of yourself deep down, you cannot fail to see that I am right. The reason that we are still primates as a mass. Mankind has only begun to unfold spiritually. He has only just begun to know instead of sense. The few who have unfolded beyond primacy must help unfold the rest of the human race in its age-long search for the kingdom of heaven. With our love and blessing, I am sincerely Walter Russell. P.S. Please remember that balance is the very foundation of creation, as it is also your foundation. The next group of lessons will fully explain how the thought bodies of all your ideas are founded upon the fulcrum of the universe. End of lesson.